Good afternoon, everyone. It is Flood here. For those who don't know me, I'm a professional player for Falcons Esports, and today we're going over some team fighting fundamentals. This is lecture 8. The point of this episode is just to give you guys a better understanding on how to approach team fights. I definitely can't help you win team fights. That's all on you guys to improve individually on a mechanical level. But when we're taking team fights, if we approach them with a certain set of metrics, then I think on average we're going to have a much better chance of winning. So let's go over this really quickly. So our approach to team fights should be really straightforward. Really, we should be thinking about two things, and that's the goal and the risk that we have to undertake to take a team fight. Now, when we're thinking about goals, we should always be thinking about why we're team fighting, right? A lot of people don't think about why, and they end up dying on edge because there's no point to team fight, right? So when you take a team fight, you need to think about why. And are we getting a better position? Do we get a high ground spot? Are we going to get a central position? Are we going to have a clear edge? You know, have a goal behind the team fight. Because sometimes taking a team fight for no reason will actually lose you the game, even if you win the 4v4 completely clean, you know? So another goal you need to talk about is how to win it. So that we'll cover that in the next slide. But then we go to the risk. So understanding how terrain will impact our approach, you know? Terrain will change how we approach a team fight, right? If there's areas that have off angles or rocks or trees that can really create difficulties for our team to push through a certain set of obstacles, then we need to approach it and really maybe sweep the edge first, then push in, you know? So everything changes based on the terrain around you. And the most important part of team fighting is we need to evaluate the risk of a third party before we team fight. If we are team fighting and not thinking about getting not thinking about a third party, we're probably going to get third party, right? And we don't want to get third party because getting shot in the back is the most demoralizing way to die. And we never want to get shot in the back. We want to make sure all our fights are on our terms and have as limited risk as possible. So with these two approaches and I guess metrics, goals and risks, it's a lot easier to pick and choose team fights, right? Because if you have a goal, you know what you need to do, you know why you're doing it, and you understand the risk that is associated with taking a team fight, that's going to be a beneficial team fight, even if you lose, because you are learning why to take team fights. Because if you lose, you might learn why not to take it, what type of terrain impacted your team fight, right? But if you approach every team fight with a goal and a risk assessment, I promise you, you are going to get better over time. Be patient. But this is the best way, I think, to approach team fights. So we'll go over some examples and some maybe some strategies on how to form on some formations. All right, well, we will quickly go over some examples, and then we are going to discuss very briefly some formations. That will be in only a 2D perspective, purely because it's up to you guys to win your gunfights. You know, it's not on me, but if you guys approach it with the right macro understanding, I'm sure you're going to win more on average. Okay, guys, we're going to watch a KDF win, but we're actually going to focus on DK and their decisions to take team fights. So right here, they isolate 3 people. They know they have to push this team, and they are grouping as 3 and having 1 person with an off angle. Right, utilizing that brute force of a 3-man with an off angle of a solo, and Sol manages to get a knock, which gives the green light for the trio to start pushing through, and they get another knock. They have information there's a team behind them, right? They know they need to commit to this side and win this team fight as soon as possible. As you can see, Sol is already set up. You can already see Sol instantly. This team hasn't even been finished, right? There's still 1 up, right? Sol instantly understands that they need to kill this team as fast as possible to minimize the risk of getting third party, because this team is always going to third party them. They have beautiful angles to do so, and I'll show you guys in PUBG as well. They have beautiful angles over this, and DK are quite literally screwed unless they kill this team very quickly, and they do a great job, almost absolutely dominate that team, but they have now forced this team to head further north, and they have enough space right now to gather themselves and make another decision. Now this team is coming and pressuring them, and that is their decision. They could either go east or west, but I think west is almost always the correct play here. And Damwon are eventually, DK are eventually about to die just because of this team's advantage in terms of positional advantage, right? But when we look back at the team fights, even though they lost this game, they made pretty decent decisions, I think. I think that they did a really good job of getting further forward, and that Seoul was very quick to identify the next fight, and they just didn't win it 4-0 cleanly, and that would have been extra 4 points, you know? This would have been their game, because at this point, it's very difficult with this many players on your north and 3 players on your south. These guys are going to be pinched no matter what they do. The same thing applies if you could say, why do they just not take the fight? If they go this way and reset over here, this team pushes in, they are once again pinched. So they are maximizing their points, which is something really good. So we're going to go look in PUBG and see what these angles actually look like, so you can visualize this a little better. All right, so we have the setup of, I believe it was BSG, right? So we have 1 player here and 2 players a bit higher north, right? They have successfully cut off DK's easy fighting line, I guess you could say, you know? And by playing over here, they've kind of forced DK to push further west, because that provides a net of safety. You look at this, why can't I access this? Here you go. There's a net of safety in this foliage back here, which is where DK were fighting. So DK made the right decision, because they want to go as far back as they can, while our players from this team can only see this area here. So DK seriously could not push this way without getting third-partied. And that's a decision they had to make. You know, they were thinking about, I'm sure they were, very smart team. They were probably thinking about, if they go direct and don't try and push further west, they would just get third-partied, right? They're thinking about that risk, thinking about the third-party potential. So they've done a fantastic job here to identify that going west is their best chance of getting more points. And you can see that they are completely safe from the east, but they are going to get pushed, because once gunshots start happening over near this west area, the east team is almost always going to utilize that to get down into this valley and control the next priority position, which does control a good amount of space, right? So let's talk about some formations, right? We should only really be doing 3, maybe 4 formations when we're looking for a team fight. The first formation is a 3-1 with an anchor. So think about the game we just watched, how the light blue team, I believe, had an anchor holding space, right? The anchor's job is to hold space to mitigate risk of a third party, you know, letting teams know that you're still there, holding space, and you're going to shoot back, right? While 3 players are trying to achieve a goal, that might be clearing out a solo, clearing out a duo, or just making space by being there and applying pressure to teams around you. That's the first one, and this should be done in the majority of circumstances, right? You should always be having 3 people achieving something and 1 person being a backup safety, and feeding information to make sure that 3 players know what's happening at all times. The second formation is a 3-1 with one of the players getting an off angle. And when we think of the game we just reviewed, this is a perfect example of Seoul getting an off angle. An anchor isn't necessarily in the fight, right? That's the difference between these two. An anchor is usually sitting back and a lot more safe, and they can't actually do that much. But an off angle is in the fight. You are playing to get the pick, you're playing to be a surprise, and you're in the fight in AR range most of the time, right? This allows the 3 players up front to create a diversion, which allows the solo to get an off angle and hopefully a free knock, or maybe even 2, to kickstart the fight, you know, really get the fight rolling. And so that's the difference between these two. It's just simply the job of the one, and this is a lot more aggressive and this is a lot more defensive. So we would use the aggressive one when we have calculated that if we do not do something, we will die. And when we use a more defensive one is when we have calculated that if we do not do something, we will still be alive, right? So it's really thinking about, are we going to die, or if we don't do something, are we going to die if we don't do something? And if the answer is we're going to die if we do not do something, then we should be taking a more aggressive approach to our team fight. And one of the last ones, which is the main one, is just four-manning it. On my team, we call this the Terminator. We simply group as four and fucking push shit. And this is done when you have identified that the risk is very high. You have a high risk percentage, right? So you need to do something as soon as possible. You need all four ARs just to gun them down, you know? We're steamrolling this team. We need everyone holding hands, getting every trade we can. We need to win this fight as soon as possible. And if we do not, we are going to have a high risk percent chance of getting third partied, right? So we need to think about each formation as a way to utilize our strategy. So we have a defensive strategy, an aggressive strategy, and an aggressive strategy. And this is how we should think about things. Like when we're trying to achieve a goal, is it a defensive goal? Is it an aggressive goal? Is it a goal that if we do not do, we are going to die because the risk is too high, right? We need to think about how risk affects our goals, because risk is ultimately the biggest factor in PUBG. We want to risk as little as possible while gaining as much as possible. So it's a really good thing to think about. And I'll just draw some super quick examples of what a formation may look like. So if we have 3 people on one team, and this is the 3-1 defensive, we might have 3 people over here and 1 person with this person holding off, let's say, a duo over here. And this team is paving the way for their control. Because think about, this is the amount of space this team controls now because they have this gap between them. So this is a 3-1 defensive, right? A 3-1 offensive looks something like this. Same principle. We have the duo over here. Instead of having our solo here, we don't have the solo here. We have our solo creeping around here. So if we have a team of 3 here, this is the goal, is for these 3 to create a diversion. So these 3 look this way and our solo can open up. Or in a lot of professional games, what will happen is these solos will end up fighting because they're trying to achieve the same thing, right? So in doing this, you are leaving yourself open to a potential third party, but this is the most effective way to team fight, the 3-1 offensive, because it's the most efficient and foolproof way to team fight. If you have one player who is an off angle, these players have to be aware of it. And if they are not aware of it, this guy's going to knock them. And if they're too aware of it, then these guys are going to knock them, right? So trying to think about how we're drawing aggro, we're creating fear for the other team. And finally, we have our 4, and that would simply be when we have a 3-man on a, let's just say they have a great position, they have a high ground spot, and we are 4-man here, and we need to kill this 3-man right now because they have a defendable spot and we do not. Us taking time to send an anchor out may be enough of a time risk for this team to just push us. So we need to straight on brute force get through these guys. You don't use this too often. It's usually it's like a Hail Mary play. You know, you just have to do it or you're going to die. We call it the Terminator because you just got to do it. And if you do it, it might work. But if it doesn't, we are fucked anyway. So that's the main thing. There are 2-2s. There are 1-1-1s, guys. But let's think about what we want to do. We want to be consistent. If we get caught out as a solo, our whole team could crumble. If we get caught out as a duo, our whole team may crumble. And the example of a team doing a 3-1 offensive split, if we are doing a 2-2, if the 3-man manages to deal with the front 2-man, let's go 3 and 2. If the 3-man manages to deal with the front 2-man, the back 2-man will not be able to assist in any way in terms of pressuring for the insta-res. All right, this team will be able to insta-res because the distance between the two is very big. Same principle as the 1-1-1. If one person gets knocked over here, this person is going to be fucking useless, and so is this person, right? And then if they're 3 and 1 in here, think about 3 people are going to bulldoze through with the off anchor, right? So these are super scuffed, by the way. I don't know how to edit properly, Lamau, but I hope you guys get the gist of it. When we think about team fighting, we do want to make sure we are sticking to these formations, as I believe they're most effective at getting shit done. You know, that's the goal. When we go back, what is our goal? Getting shit done, right? We want to achieve something. So hopefully, if you found this useful, please let me know. I'd also love if you guys left questions on what you'd like me to do in the future. I think it's really helpful when I have an idea of what people might want to see. And then, of course, I always respond to any question given to me. So thank you guys so much again for watching another lecture. You guys are kind of the goats. We're going to call it here. And I appreciate everyone.